while back, I did a video on using primers, shotgun primers, rifle, pistol primers, and also muzzleloader primers. There's several varieties of those to propel various objects out of a barrel for the purpose of comparing the pressure levels from the different primers to get an idea of what they really do. Now, this is a misnomer because some of them produce a lot of heat. Some of them produce a lot of gas expansion from whatever material they have. That material burns off, producing gas of specific volume. Some of them seem to combine the effects. If it's hotter, it gets bigger expansion temporarily. Some of them burn at a fast rate, so it very violently throws a projectile out of the barrel. Some of them are designed not to do that at all because that would affect whether or not the gun is safe or whether or not the propellant works. A good example of this is that smokeless powder wants a shock wave, but black powder and gunpowder, old school stuff, doesn't like that as much. It's supposed to ignite it and let it burn. But then again, if you have a short barrel, long barrel, that's important. So there's a bunch of variables. So what I did was I looked up people who'd done these experiments because I don't have access and resources to all of these, and I wanted to compare apples to apples. Fat chance. Anyway, the video's gone. I've wasted a minute and 20 of your life, so let's try to do this. Here we go. Muzzleloading for Deer and Turkey, a 2005 book by Dave Ehrig, is cited sometimes. Page 83, Chapter 9, lists how many cubic centimeters of gas is produced by each of the primers that was tested. That's what's cited. I found a copy of the book that had been dumped onto Google Books, and I was able to look at where it came from. It's like a meme. It's just a drawing of them. Poorly done, by the way, I got to point out. The wrong ratios. It's not very good. And it has some suspicious content in it. Let me read it back. Now, I'm going to read back the important thing. How much gas is produced by each primer type. Let's start with the 209 shotgun primer. It puts out what amounts to 22 cubic centimeters of gas pressure. Now, to think of that a little bit more clearly, let's say you look at a .22 caliber bullet. The bullet has a cross-sectional area of a certain number of square centimeters. Let's do an assumption that that's 22 cubic centimeters, and we're going to chop it in half twice, or make that 4 times. So we can get 80 centimeters of length of distance from something that's exactly half a centimeter by half a centimeter surface area. .22 caliber bullets are 5.56 centimeters across, or millimeters. So it's not 80, but it's basically a barrel length, and that's the gas expansion from a shotgun primer. But how is that really? The gas produced is compressible, and it also has heat. Is it expanding quickly or slowly? There's nothing specified. But let's go through this. Here we go. What are the other pressure sources? Well, let's try rifle primers. They work out at about 11.7 cubic centimeters of gas. And if we look at the muzzleloader type, number 11 cap that's used to just hit it, and it produces a spark down to a metal tube and goes into the chamber where the gunpowder is, those put out 6, maybe 7 cubic centimeters of gas, whether the magnum or standard. Then there's a winged musket cap. It's right in the middle. It's right above rifle primer amount of gas produced, and it's at 14.3 cubic centimeters. Now, I'm rounding these off for a good reason here. They're all below the level of a shotgun primer, and they didn't specify which one. There is some differences, obviously. I'll bring that up in a minute. But that means you could go from a standard number 11 cap, which there are toy guns, parlor guns, that are based on using those, literally a cap gun, to propel a metal BB or sometimes a pellet gun pellet at a target across the room without having it be dangerous enough to really worry about hurting anyone. The shotgun primer version of it does exist and is considered borderline a self-defense weapon because it's putting out a little over 3 times as much gas. Now, the other thing is that all of these alternate back and forth. Look below me in the description, between 3,024 degrees Fahrenheit and 3,717 degrees Fahrenheit exactly. That means they didn't measure it. That means they had a go-no gauge. Is it above or below a certain pressure level and peak level, bands of how hot. So hot versus not so hot propellant or pressure or whatever. People talk about how hot a primer is, and that also means temperature as well as heat, as well as how fast it burns the material. These could be very significant or dangerous things to keep account of. So let's say 3,700 degrees versus 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. You can look it up below. But in all of this, the shotgun primer produces the most gas expansion. Now, the next thing to compare it to is if you were to use the primer, propellant, and projectile, but leave out the propellant. Just the primer, how far can it throw a given item of a certain mass, diameter, shape, whatever. The only other thing that people find on this, and again, this is me repeating stuff I found last time, but I'm going to be a little more clear about it, is somebody doing an experiment with a .32 caliber Green Mountain muzzleloader rifle that used discs for putting a primer in. It's a insert behind the barrel so you can use it to run different types of primers. And it had an NFJP conversion. I can't even find out what that is. Anyway, it's a .32 caliber rifle. And someone put a .31 caliber bullet, or round ball, down through the barrel, muzzleloader, in a patch that made it .32 caliber compatible. The round ball was fired only using a primer, and the round ball weighed anywhere from 45 to 49 grains, peaking at 50 grains. If you're not aware of it, a .22 caliber bullet, smaller diameter, but longer, out of a long rifle or a short cartridge, and maybe even a magnum, is around 50 grains to 60 in the top end. And also on the low end, 223, 5.56 rifles use about 50 grains, or 60. So this is in the range of what's considered a minimum mass on impact. It's also, if you want to look up what .32 caliber corresponds to in bird and buckshot, you might want to look that up too. It's not a light load. So anyway, small pistol primer by Winchester. Put it out, threw it out of the barrel, out of this gun, which I can't find the length of the barrel, but I'm going to assume that it's at least 16 inches. 116 feet per second. That's about, okay. And 143 feet per second for small rifle primers. If you're not aware of it, rifle and pistol primers are small and large diameter. There's also the primers sometimes are the same diameter from rifle to pistol, but the rifle ones have thicker metal they're made out of. They're a metal cup with priming material in them. Then we get the Winchester 209 shotgun primer. This is done with an adapter to go back to shotgun primers. This one immediately went up to 221 feet per second, and that's a Winchester ML for muzzleloader. Then we go up to 777 muzzleloader Winchester 209 primers. These are again used for black powder or black powder substitute 777. That was 244 feet per second. Then we get the Kleanbore brand or version from Remington. It's a 209 primer, muzzleloader, 318 feet per second. Then we get normal, ordinary Winchester number 209As. The Winchester 209A went up to 336 feet per second. Then there was 341 feet per second for a Remington standard 209 primer, just a generic garden variety bolt buy. When we get to Cheddite, it goes up to 347 feet per second, a little bit faster than the Remington 209 generic standard shotgun primers. Then we get to 381 feet per second. We're talking literally, we're doing triple the speed here just within shotgun primers. And that's a federal number 209A. 209A federal primers are considered hot, and they are the standard ones used for igniting smokeless powder. Smokeless powder likes to be hit with a kind of a shockwave to almost, but not quite, detonate it. Black powder likes to be packed really tightly against the flash hole and to ignite and burn in a progressive, flambeing kind of thing. It doesn't like being shockwaved. And you don't want to leave space around it because it can create a pressure shockwave inside of it and set it off prematurely, and the bullet won't move. It'll sit there essentially stuck and blow the barrel apart. That's why also they don't normally use at all smokeless powder in a muzzleloader. You can, but you got to know what you're doing, and you have to look up the instructions, and most people just don't want to mess with it. That and gunpowder is kind of cheap sometimes, depending on where you are. So that's again, 31 caliber lead ball, almost 50 grains, being thrown out of a barrel up to 381 feet per second. And before that, with the same shotgun primer, we don't even know what pressure level or what brand, we got 21 to 22 cubic centimeters of gas expansion. And again, the temperature was 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, not as hot as 3,700. And again, those are all rounded off numbers. They didn't really check them. Now we're going to look at another example with 209 primers propelling a smaller size. We're not doing 22 caliber, we're doing 17 caliber, aka pellet gun, BB gun, kind of bullets. Now these were in fact 7 to 8 grain, 4.5 millimeter lead balls. They're not, pellet gun pellets. They're not some exotic slug, quote unquote, that's done out of air guns. These are just BBs, lead balls, like you'd find in a birdshot container or buckshot container. Through Petter Soli rifle and pistol. This is a 10 land and groove barrel of various lengths. The pistol one is 3 1/4 inches. The rifle is 17.75 to 18 inches, depending on whether or not it's got the 1 in 15 twist as a rifle and or being a smoothbore like a shotgun, because they sold it that way too. I couldn't find out which one it was, but here's the numbers. 690 feet per second, 8.5 foot-pounds. That's the rifle, and it's called the White Hawk. The Pedersoli pistol, that's 3 1/2 inch or 3 1/4 inch barrel, depending on which one, put out 4.86 foot-pounds, 520 feet per second, and it's called the Guardian Derringer. These are all single shots, and there are ones that are made with multiple barrels, pepper boxes, revolvers, etc. And that one had a 1 in 16 inch twist, apparently. All right. So, what do we learn here? Well, longer barrel using the same propellant. In this case, it was a shotgun primer, the same brand and make. So they did several tests. By going 3 divided by 0, carry the 1 over. A longer barrel, much longer. You got almost 200 feet per second extra, which means it was kind of probably optimized for a shorter barrel length than the 17 inches, or more accurately, primers aren't optimized for your barrel length. This is not what they're used for normally. But how does this compare to a pellet gun? A very good pellet gun that'll go for 200 or less used can go 1,000 feet per second with the same pellet, and a heavier pellet with better ballistics, a longer range, rifled only, and has virtually no regulation possible with it. So should a 209 shotgun primer, because that's the highest pressure, highest gas out of all of them, and highest speed, should that be able to ram a 22 caliber 16 grain lead ball out of a 6-inch barrel at 600 feet per second, which would be faster than this other one using a much smaller diameter? No, it would be going slower. It would definitely go slower. Just like we only got 380 feet per second from a 32 caliber. No. So on a 22 caliber, when people build the slightly unusual pellet guns that use 22 caliber slugs, including the weird, actually quite useful ones, they're not going to get 600 feet per second. You're probably going to get around 400 feet per second, which is just breaking the point of the entry-level pellet gun. Meanwhile, you can get those pellet guns and diesel them, and they'll go supersonic, 1,000 feet per second, on half as many pumps or on less gas, which is one of the designs I thought I'd probably use. So that answers this question in the video, because someone asked me on one of my channels, can a shotgun primer propel a 22 caliber? And again, the mass of it matches mostly what we have with the 32 caliber, and the diameter, all things being equal, it'd be about 400 feet per second. Would this be considered a deadly weapon if you fired it at someone? Whether or not it's an air gun or not, if you shoot somebody with anything that throws a projectile, you can be charged with firing a dangerous or lethal item. If it's a bow and arrow, it's still a lethal weapon. Doesn't have to have gunpowder. So anyway, you can look up all the other data that I found and look up the sources. And yes, I can actually cite a book now. This is quite useful. If anybody has any idea what happened to that video I had that was much more clear and straightforward than this one, I'd love to have it. All I've got are tatters and pieces of it referenced in Flurgan videos. I wonder why. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck.